Should we begin now, Dipanshu?
Sudhir sir, may we start? Okay. Good
Saviko
afternoon,
namaskar.
everyone.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Please, Dipanshu, continue.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to this highly anticipated series of webinars on SQAAF. I am Dipanshu, Assistant Secretary at CBSE, and I feel incredibly privileged to be your host for today's event. We have gathered here for an exciting and informative session focused on SQAAF. In the last session, our resource persons talked about system thinking mindsets. In the series of webinars on SQAAF, today we will talk about the first part of first domain that under SQAAF, that is curriculum. I am thrilled to see such a diverse and enthusiastic audience ready to engage in meaningful discussions. I must say, it's fantastic to see such a diverse and enthusiastic audience joining us for some meaningful discussions. Before we jump right in, I want to give a special shout out to our distinguished guests and resource persons. A huge honor to have with us Dr. Shweta Singh, Joint Secretary of Academic Unit CBSE. Her vision and support have made this event possible. So let's give her a warm welcome as she takes the stage to address the webinar. Dr. Shweta ma'am.
Thank you, Dipanshu. Sabiko namaskar and welcome to yet another very exciting session, which all of you have been waiting and anticipating it. So we've already this in this series of webinars, we've already had, I believe, two sessions, and today is going to be the next session, wherein the first domain out of the 7 domains would be touched upon. And in fact, this domain is probably, we can say, the heart of the SQAAF framework. It is curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment. And as we all know, that pedagogy, assessment, as well as the curriculum are the main key areas where we need to review and work on when we're running a school. So, in fact, this domain will be touched upon and delved in quite a bit of depth for the next 3 sessions. So today we will have one resource person begin with it, and then it will be led on by another resource person tomorrow, and then day after. So we will be covering almost 40% of the complete SQAAF framework when we cover this domain. And as you go through this, I'm sure you will find a lot many things which ring a bell, which you are aware about, which you have been doing in your classrooms and schools. But there might be some other areas which will be new and where you can learn from those areas, you can learn from those benchmarks and try to implement it. And also, as resource persons, it will be very stage is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Shweta, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dipanshu.
Thank you.
And yeah, so namaskar, sat shri akal, hello, and namaste to everybody. Yes, it was a very, very interesting session that we have been witnessing since last 2 times. Let me start sharing my screen as I talk to you people. And while I talk, I just want any one of us to give me a heads up whether I'm clearly visible.
Yes, ma'am, we can see you.
Clear also. Perfect. So yes, as Dr. Shweta has already introduced us and told what is in store for us for next 3 days. Yes, we are going to touch upon the domain 1, which includes 40% of most of the SQAAF framework, and it's curriculum, pedagogy, and assessments. And it is a part 1. We initially, when we planned it, we thought we'll cover it as curriculum, pedagogy, and assessments. And primarily, that is how we are going to take it up. However, when we started looking into the how we transact this session on curriculum, or how do we transact the session on pedagogy and assessment, it seemed like it was interwoven, which it is. So we decided to call it all as a domain 1 part 1 and domain 1 part 2 and domain 1 part 3. So yes, let's get going. And as it has already been third, now we are on to the third session of this series, This webinar series is going to have 13 sessions, one session as an introductory and session on SQAAF, and the second one on system thinking mindset has these are the slides that I picked up from Shanti ma'am's first session, and then of course it was repeated on the second time in the Kalpana ma'am session as well. And why are we repeating this over and over again is that it is very important for all of us to understand why are we doing what we are doing, why this cough, how are we going to benefit from it. It's really, really important that we look at the entire framework. We look at the entire school systems, all the areas, domains of school, and through a system thinking mindset. Must come through the system thinking mindset. That is what the endeavor has been. And how do we do this? Within a school, through a team, do we learn together? Do we build our team together? Do we set out on this road together? Our processes, the entire system of our school, are we planning to have it process and oriented process center? How are we, all the thing that we kind of put up or look into, are they going to impact on the student outcomes? This is where we want our, and when we look at where we are today, even when we as a mentors, or when we were dealing with our friends, and when we were going to different schools, or when we are discussing among the resource persons, we all realized there's so much of learning that was happening from one another. There were a whole lot of examples that we could quote, we could grasp, we could understand. And whenever there is a practices which are shared, wherever there is a feedback that comes to us or feed forward that comes to us, there's a whole lot of learning. There's a total different movement of quality consciousness that that is set off. So whichever part, whichever learning curve you are at, I'm sure there is enough to contribute, there is enough to grasp. So if you're already doing a lot, please contribute it back to CBSE, help us develop our resources. Because our endeavor is to bring a nationwide understanding of the score, and we actually all work together towards the school quality. And carry out the assessment and assurance through the framework, so that we all get into a better education space in India. What would the sequence be like today? We will be what will be the outcomes? We will be talking about the outcomes of today, what exactly would be done today. Then we will again revise the anatomy of framework, all those portions which are very, very important to us, which actually bring out the spirit of SCORE. We intend to keep repeating it because that helps us reinforce and orient our minds or orient our process into right direction. Yes, we will be trying to take up a portion of Domain 1 curriculum primarily through exemplars, and we would also map those exemplars, whether the exemplars are from ACPP or they are from the lesson plans. We will try to map it with skills. We'll try to do a justice, whatever these 2 hours allow us. And of course, we will finish with question answer session. And this question answer session, I would request my other resource persons also to join me in answering your questions. Like I said, that today the day is going to include of the overview of the Domain 1. And we are going to see how strong curricular, pedagogical, and assessment practices are actually help us achieve the learning outcomes. And when do we actually do the curriculum planning? How do we bring in the NEP recommendations, especially in the field of skill building? Because we have all realized that how do we prepare our learners? How are we preparing them to be future ready? How are we preparing them to be ready for the global world, for the changing world? Not just the NEP recommendations, there have been a lot of recommendations from the board. There have been a whole lot of documents, policy documents from all these apex bodies. All of them are, how do we actually include them into us? The NCF, the NEP, the NCRT learning outcomes document, and etc. So through this exemplars that I mentioned, we will try to reflect on our school practices. Are they actually in sync with the recommendations which are there specifically in the skill building? That is going to be focus of today's session. And when we do this, we automatically promote lifelong global citizenship, lifelong learning atmosphere in our schools. So specific to today's session, participants across the country, I know that this is, we have been watching the footfall on the YouTube viewership and things like that. And I saw that I did not track second session, but first session had 65,000 viewership. So for all the participants from across, after we have finished a session, they'll be able to understand all the standards which are in domain 1, specifically in the curriculum area. We will be touching upon others as well, since we all understand that this particular domain impacts the learner outcome maximum, and of course all the domains also. After reading this score, how do we actually interpret it in simple terms? How do we actually understand in the simple terms? That is what we will try to bring it through a slide, through a simple examples, and that will also help you contextualize the entire learning. How do you actually create alternatives for your own setup in your own city, in your own village, in your own school, whichever school that it may be. And while we are doing it, how does the entire design process from curriculum to lesson plan, what is the impact of nice curriculum planning onto the lesson plans and eventually the learning outcomes of children? So that is what our endeavor is going to be. And while we do this and we develop critical and creative thinking skills, not only amongst the children, because we have been talking about it. Are we doing the same for ourselves? Are we actually solving day-to-day problems using these skills? So these are the various things that will be included in today's session. And while we do it, I think the ball was already set rolling in yesterday's session, where it was brought to the fore that the process-centered approach in your school practices, or in any processes for that matter in your school, helps maximum. So keeping that thought in mind, what we have over here is a SQAAF framework. I think you have already got used to seeing this beautiful flower, which has got 7 petals. And the standards that have been set in these 7 different domains of the school functioning, they're all different domains of school functioning only if you look at it: curriculum, pedagogy and assessment, infrastructure, human resources, inclusive practices, management and governance, leadership, beneficiary satisfaction. It is an exhaustive, implementable, and objective self-assessment, or we can even call it peer assessment tool, the SQAAF, which has been brought to us. I would say it is a continual tool. It reassures the stakeholders that the school aspires for continual improvement, and thus leading to achievement of desired learning outcomes. Eventually, that is what we are all targeting at. That is where we are all trying to arrive at. और इन सब एंडेवर में हम देखेंगे कि क्या हम एस्टैब्लिश कर पाते हैं कनेक्शंस अमंग ऑल दीज डिफरेंट डोमेन्स. क्या ये सारे डोमेन्स इंटरवोवन नहीं है? क्या हम इनको अलग अलग ही देखेंगे या इनको in totality देखेंगे? Should it be looked at as a totality rather than in isolation? As we get into all the areas, we'll realize that they're all seamlessly interwoven. So the different components of SQAAF need to be viewed, I think, as a whole rather than an seclusion. And I think that is what was very beautifully brought out in yesterday's session. The anatomy of school quality assurance framework, what we have, how it was brought about, how is it structured. Okay, so what we see over here is 7 domains. I've already shown you. All the 7 domains are subdivided into subdomains and further into standards, and each standard has performance indicators and levels mentioned in the booklet. We all understand that the standard and the performance indicators are the center of any assessment framework for that matter. And these, I think, work as a basis on which assessment has to be carried out. Assessment as in our own assessment of our systems within a school. So these 7 domains, which cover the broad areas of school functioning over here that you see, have subdomains, and these subdomains are the ones which detail out the areas under them. Standards for the, if you look at this, there are descriptive standards which come up with, which have been detailed under performance indicators have been detailed under every standard, and they have been mentioned against each standard if you look at the framework. And we had requested people to keep a framework right next to them, and I have also done that, being a good student. So we are on to page number 11 right now. And what I am picking up from here is this particular anatomy of standards framework, which is there on the page number 10. If you look at it, all these subdomains, if I take an example of subdomain of curricular pedagogy and assessment, what all it might cover, how will I assess my processes under curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment? Will I look at the curriculum planning? Will I look at teaching learning process? Will I look into student enrichment, skill-based vocational educational programs embedded in the ACPP, the annual curriculum and pedagogical plan? Are we mainstreaming our physical education sports as well? Are we working towards developing values and ethos? What is the student performance like? How are we actually doing the assessment of learning outcomes? And what is our feedback mechanism? And how do we create our own learning enhancement program, the improvement plans, etc.? And is the early childhood care and education and foundational FLN, that is the foundational literacy and numeracy, has it been addressed? Are we actually looking into that? We have this under 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 5. There's the latest entry of the foundational years. Are we paying enough attention to that? Is what we need to look into. This is how it is divided into various subdomains. The first domain has got 7 subdomains and then 26 standards. The infrastructure has got 12 subdomains and 20 standards, and likewise human resources has got 5 subdomains and 10 standards. Inclusive practices has got 5 with 7 standards, and management and governance has got 10 subdomains and 10 standards. Leadership comes separately under 3 subdomains and 5 standards. And beneficiary satisfaction, which includes parents, teachers, community, students, of course, and everybody, management, and which has got 6 subdomains and 6 standards. Now, since we have already expressed that we are going to cover domain 1, I would like to bring in an overview right here. This has been pulled out straight from the book again, and the domain overview is exactly the way it is listed here. I will pause for a second and let you read this, and then as I'll highlight what is mentioned in the overview. This slide talks about the requirement of a wide range of inclusive and innovative policies, which are and the practices which are generating those policies, those practices are there. They're supporting those practices, and we talk about the very well-defined outcomes of all the processes that we are going to implement under the curriculum, pedagogy, or assessment. When we create these curriculum, when we create these policies and we create these practices, are they going to allow a holistic, cohesive, and free learning spaces for learners? And does it bring in the entire student-friendly systems and operatives? Does it really encourage student-centered learning? Does it really encourage education to be a functional aspect of our lives? Or is it going to be by rote or theoretical and things like that? Are we concentrating not just on the academic processes? Are we also concentrating on the non-academic processes and the products? Is the teacher's knowledge limited to the subjects, or does it go beyond? Are we concentrating on how students learn and not just what they learn? Are we concentrating on the learning environment? Are we really serious enough to be trying to create positive classrooms? What are the teacher-student interactions like? How are we actually building up this interdisciplinary approach in our sessions? Because we know that this big world is a complex of so many processes. They aren't standalone physics or chemistry problems. They are all integrated. The life is like that. So how are we actually are we putting those load on the students with those subjective end of term summative assessments, or are we bringing in informal assessments also? Are we actually measuring the students onto their development continuum, or are we just giving them marks and grades? How does it actually happen? And if my suppose planning is there and we want to carry out our processes, our curriculum related processes or pedagogy related processes or assessment related processes in a very organized manner, trying to meet the learning outcome, trying to prepare the students for 21st century or 22nd century, if I may put it that way now. Are we upgrading our staff for that? We wish to do that. We have made a very lovely policy where we have placed a very nice program, but are we equipping our staff to do that? Is our planning based on the knowledge, competencies, and skills? Are we bringing in inclusivity? All these we have to understand. Is there a culture of innovation amongst the students as well as the teachers? If I look at it, this is what I have over here. We have got, if you want to refer to the book, it is on the page number 17. And this is where the subdomains of the domain 1 has been listed. And the subdomains come under curriculum planning, teaching learning processes, student enrichment, skill-based vocational educational programs embedded in the ACPP, mainstreaming physical education, sports, values and ethos, student performance, assessment of learning outcomes, and feedback and learning enhancement program. And of course, it is also bringing in the ECCE and FLN. The curriculum planning, we need to see that is are my teachers and principals, do they even understand the spirit and content of NCF that has been brought out, and what were the recommendations of NEP? Are the school leaders whatever the CBSE came out with, the curriculum documents or the support material that the board came up with, do we have it with us? Have we referred to it? Have we exposed our teachers to it? Is my school integrated ACPP, annual curriculum pedagogical plan, ready? Does it reflect the recommendations by the board? Is it in alignment with the board recommendations or NEP recommendations? Curriculum that develops skills and abilities. Have we designed it that way? Is it promoting global citizenship? Are we concentrating on the lifelong learning? Are we actually targeted towards in progress to the sustainable education, or are we still at the traditional level? So we need to look into this is how we assess ourselves while we are assessing ourselves and under the curriculum planning. These kind of parameters not just help us assess ourselves, this assessment helps us to understand where we can go from here, how we can go right, what kind of changes that we can bring in, what are the lacuna, what are the gaps, and we do a gap analysis and carry out with an improvement value. This is the value of this document. Under the teaching learning processes, of course, it is more of a compliances and the policy document. Are you compliance with the rules, regulations, policy documents? What is the teacher-student ratio? What is the optimal number of teaching periods that you have for your teachers, teaching hours that you have for your teachers? What are the teaching learning approaches? Are they actually reflecting the understanding of the diversity that we have in our country, in our classroom, in our school? Is the environment is it conducive for joyful learning? This is what we are trying to reflect upon while we are talking about the domain 1. And of course, we all have gone through the NCERT learning outcomes. Is it actually being referred to when we are designing our own lesson plans? Do we really understand what it is? What has been your skilling program like in your school? Do we understand what art education is? Are we actually trying to increase the employability skills amongst these students? Are we actually providing internship and employability skills to our students? Are there enough opportunities for them? What really, when we talk about skills, are we limiting ourselves to the certain skills, or are we actually talking about the 21st century skills like literary and reading skills limited to the English domain, or are we actually promoting creative and critical thinking skills? Is my language, when I'm classifying all these things, when I am actually putting it down in my lesson plans, do I use terms like interpreting data, evaluation, assessing, recognizing arguments? Do we build in these kind of learning outcomes so that not just my teachers, even my students are oriented towards understanding what it is? And of course, in social and emotional skills, which we all have understood is a really, really an area where we all need to really pay attention. And talking about the physical education sports, are they just the games periods in our schools, or are we actually have created a policy in which we promote health and physical um, education in students? Are we really serious about, is there a proper curriculum for it? Is it really part of the main lessons that we have? Is there a integrated lesson planning with the say scholastic subjects along with the sports and things like that? Are we keeping our inclusivity in mind when we are taking physical education lessons? Have we kept all the children who are there in our schools in mind when we are creating that? Are we working towards values and ethos? Have we actually created that climate in our school, that climate of care, climate of compassion, climate of respect? Are we teaching all these things? uh, do we take pride in our school? Do we take pride in our community? Do we take pride in our nation? For our nation, do we have all these? Are we really working towards that? The school inculcates pride, it says. How do we do that? How is it embedded in our curriculum? What kind of lesson plans do we create, or the school activities do we create? What is my school calendar? What does it look like? Does it cater for it? And of course, 1.6 talks about the assessment, in which we have talked about the variety of assessments: for assessment of learning, for learning, and as learning. This will be taken up in a very detailed manner day after tomorrow. And ECCE, since it has come in as into a mainstream after the NEP changed from 10+2 to 5+3+3+5, and there is a special focus on this, and that is where the foundational stage, they talked about there are very well-defined learning outcomes which has already been brought to us through the NCF, and it's a very, very beautiful document that we all must go through. Talking about the curriculum, we thought it was very, very important for us to understand the difference between the two. When we talk about curriculum, if I would say it is more prescriptive. It is larger. It is wider. It is a set of courses or content as an educational institution, or as a board, or as a bigger institution or a university that offers, that comes under curriculum. It it is generally created sometimes at the nation level, or at the state level, or at the district level, or at the university or institution level. Whereas the syllabus that is created by the designated teachers. And when I look at the syllabus, there's more descriptive list of instructions, activities, scheduling for a particular subject to be taught in a class. And it is limited onto what it is, basically a written statement of what is going to be the content which is going to be taught in the class. And it might contain the details of assignments, assessments also, but curriculum would be more wide. It will contain course content, objectives, methodology, etc., etc. Now, can I say that the syllabus is a subset of curriculum? Probably yes. Just the way course outline is a subset of syllabus and lesson plan is subset of course outline. जब हम एक करिकुलम को समझने की कोशिश करते हैं और उसके डिज़ाइन का जो पूरा प्रोसेस था, वो कैसे करिकुलम से लेसन प्लान तक पहुंचा, क्या जो लेसन प्लान में प्लान किया एक टीचर ने, क्या वो करिकुलम का जो एक मैक्रो पॉलिसी थी, एक जो हमारा ऑब्जेक्टिव था, जो एजुकेशनल गोल्स थे, क्या वो लर्निंग आउटकम जब एक लेसन प्लान में आए, क्या वो उसको कोरिलेट कर रहा था? Was it in sync with all the recommendations? Is what the difference is. If I look at the curriculum, what does it do? It provides, I think, the purpose of it is to maximize the capacity of all our students. I think we use evidence-based teaching learning pedagogies to ensure that the students achieve what was the recognized learning roles. You have already defined the learning roles from before. There are targeted outcomes from before. How do we actually look into it? So that is why the lesson plans which come down to the level of teachers are as important as the curriculum policy that is created at the leaders level. This is again a slide which we have seen so many times. We intend to keep talking about it because when this is our main target, this is where we are all headed towards. What kind of learner profile do we seek from our students? What are we actually preparing them for? We are preparing them for future. When we prepare them for the future, what kind of learner would we want in our classes, or what kind of learner would we want outside our classes into the world when they enter the big world, or whether it's a professional world or they in the community? What kind of people do we want? We here it talks about reflective. What does a person reflect within? I think about my behavior, actions, and an impact on others. If you look at the page number 5 of SCOAF, it very beautifully brings out the description of all these adjectives that are listed here. What we are wanting our children to be. If we are wanting our children to be self-aware, are we making them reflect within? If we are wanting them to be caring and compassionate, have we given them opportunities to, or given them an atmosphere within the school to become one? How are they socially response? Do they even know about the social etiquettes? Do they even know what are the issues which are troubling nation? Do they even know, what is expected from them as a citizen of that school, or a citizen of that city, or a citizen of that country and beyond the world? So how are they open minded? Are they receptive enough? Are they actually they are trying to make connections while using the information? Do I appreciate my own culture and beliefs, as well as the traditions and beliefs and cultures of the others? Am I open enough for that? When I say that I'm principled, do I act with honesty, integrity, fairness, and respect for others? Where am I? Am I actually responsible in my all my actions? Am I doing that? Am I resourceful? If I'm a risk taker, I have to be resourceful. I have to be resilient in all the phases of challenges. Am I prepared to do that? Do I love exploring the new ideas? Then yes, I'm a risk taker. So what am I doing in my classrooms? How am I listing my curriculum policy as a principal? What am I integrating in my lesson plans to make my students more confident so that they can express themselves confidently? How can they work with information and ideas of their own, and of course integrated with the others? So how do they actually process this? Do I give enough opportunities? Do I create my lesson plans? Do I cater for all this? How do I make them communicators? How do I make them collaborators? Do I just make them do the group activities and they become collaborators? क्या हम टीम बिल्डिंग को कोलैबोरेशन से कंफ्यूज तो नहीं कर रहे हैं? क्या कोलैबोरेशन का मतलब ये तो नहीं है कि सिर्फ टीम में बैठ के काम करना से आपको टीम बिल्डिंग एक्सरसाइज हो जाएगी? क्या मेरा एक पोर्शन, मेरा एक सबसेट, अगर मेरा जो कंट्रीब्यूशन है वो पूरे होलसम का अगर एक पार्ट बनता है, if I'm able to collaborate with 10 more and create a very beautiful product or very beautiful process, then yes, I'm a collaborator. So we have to understand uh, what activities, what kind of exposure, what kind of policies, what kind of classroom transactions, what kind of school practices, what kind of system that we set up in the various domains result into help us get these kind of learning outcomes. And we have the learner profile as mentioned over here. This is again, I've listed the entire thing all over again. I'm not repeating it. I've simply highlighted what we are going to cover in today's session. Curriculum planning is what we are going to cover. This 1.2 will be covered tomorrow by Kalpana ma'am. And then 1.3 and 1.4 and 1.5 would be again covered in the curriculum. 1.6 talks about assessment, which will be covered day after tomorrow. And of course, ECCE is what will be covered today. We'll try to give you as many exemplars as possible. We have been talking about this. I will start with the No Child Left Behind. This seems like a policy. This seems like, of course, it was an American policy to begin with, and then came in certain things in our own setup. We had RTE come into this. But I wouldn't want you to concentrate only on the policy. Just the No Child Left Behind, I think, does not help me. Just giving them equity by giving lots of schools to them, just by giving them, do I achieve this? Yes, RT did it strict. But right now, what we are talking about is that ensured that all the children reach the school, and that made sure that the children were all given the opportunities to study. But at our level, how do we actually carry on with this policy of no child left behind? I think by if I let every child grow according to his or her own developmental continuum, do not grade them as per grades and marks, etc. Where was I today? Where am I tomorrow? Yesterday this is what I knew, today I know this much. So when we focus on the academic achievements of every child, how do I, that is when I achieve this no child left behind policy. How do I ensure that my processes, uh, they are, of course, very, very closely linked with equity, equality, inclusivity, accessibility, even diversity. How do I hold my organizations where all these values are taken care of? How do I actually make sure that the child develop? I know that child development is dynamic process, and it is characterized by the milestones and challenges that a child goes through. How do I see that my entire developmental continuum outlines the student progress over time? That is why I need to concentrate on. When I look at competency based education, I achieve what I intend to achieve. When I have my outcome based approach to the education, when I have the proficiency in learning by students in mind, and of course, when I'm able to demonstrate knowledge that I've acquired, when I'm able to demonstrate the skills that I have picked up and the attitude that I've built up, and do I apply all this in the context and underpin it by values? Values are going to be overriding factor where the entire elements of competence, that is KSA, few people refer to it as ask model. Primarily, it includes knowledge, skills, and attitude. I did talk about the development continuum initially. How do we map it to the child growth? How does the learning benchmarks for the children that we create help not just the teacher but the child himself or herself identify where he or she is?
Rita ma'am,
Yes,
can I
yes,
just quickly
yes,
intervene?
yes, please.
A lot of, I think people are writing that the screen is blank. So
Oh.
I don't know what the technical issues could be. Would it be resolution issues from the people's end? Maybe the Panshu can let us know. A lot of them are saying that the screen is blank.
Yeah, Dipanshu, tell us what we can do.
Yeah, now I see somebody saying visible, somebody saying blank.
Now it is visible, but
Mhm.
in between, I think it got missed out.
Okay, so maybe what the others who for whom it was not visible, you can log out and then log in again.
Okay.
Maybe that will help. And
Okay,
also
networking issue.
what I also learned from some of the messages coming in is that you have to check your resolution. So maybe that's
Shall
another
we,
thing.
one of us, play?
You
No,
want,
I'm saying resolution from the participant side. Maybe that could be an
Okay,
issue.
okay, okay.
might be networking issue, low bandwidth at that end, and that is why probably they're not able to receive the video.
A lot of
Let's
the
do.
people are
Again, it is blank, ma'am. Again, it is blank.
So is it the bandwidth issue, Dipanshu? Can you help
Now
us
it
with
is
that?
coming up.
It's okay
Now
now,
it's coming
ma'am.
up.
because I can see it. It's very
It's
clear.
visible here.
Yeah.
So I
So
have a
we'll
feeling
ask
it's
people to
probably.
refresh, out, log in again, and check their resolutions. We'll request the participants. Meanwhile, yeah, over to you, Rita, ma'am.
Thank you, thank you. So yeah, so we were talking about the competence, what are the essential elements of it, and how do we actually make sure that this is catered for. While we were talking about the why, how do I correlate this with the learning developmental continuum that I talked about? For example, I think you'll be able to understand this very quickly through the gross motor skills concept that we have. When we know that there can be a various level your child can be at. When we say what is a gross motor skill, basically it builds the strength and coordination and the balance of the large muscles, right? So when a child sits independently, pulls self into a standing position, he's at say at the beginning stage. And how does he keeps developing in the same continuum? Probably he walks and climbs and carries stuff and drags and then maybe kicks and tosses objects. Later on, he probably runs, balances on a whole beam, or probably as he continues in this continuum, maybe at the end of it, he's very high on dexterity with on in playing football. So he kicks the moving objects now. So these are the various various level at which your child's gross motor skills are as on now. If I put it again in a different perspective, let me pick up say a primary student, and I'm trying to check how which level of development is the child at. Does he right now only identifies the types of places and say interacts with maps at this stage, or now can he navigate within a familiar environment, or where there are no obstructions? Suppose in the same environment there are with the obstructions. Can he navigate within a level where he can recognize the water bodies? Or has he even developed further and understands what are landforms? And he can now use the cardinal directions, he can follow directions. So what I'm trying to say is the same child can be at the different continuum at different time. Am I judging the child at what continuum is he at? What level is he at? Can I, at my level, is going to be difficult. I'm not saying it's going to be very easy for a teacher, but this is what individualized teaching is all about. How do we create IEPs? How do we actually make sure that whatever we are trying to teach reaches the last person also? So this is what we talked about, and we have understood that whatever we do today, whatever transactions that happen in the classroom, are what are going to lead to the transformation. If I actually want that transformation, whether in a child or we want that transformation in our society, or we are wanting the transformation of our country. So whatever we do, it is all going to be direct connection of what happens in the classroom and what actually. So how do we create a curriculum policy? Does it have all the domains that we talked about here? Does the competency-based approach to education, are we actually working towards the students? Basically, they master an ability, they master a skill, they master a competency at their own pace. Is your competencies, are your classroom lessons, are they tailored to meet the different learning abilities? Have we created it that way? Shouldn't our focus be placed on the deep understanding that is demonstrated through the applications? This is what we was wondering about. How do we actually take it forward? So when we create a curriculum policy, we make sure that all the attitudes, etc., are listed here. We have been, this is one Bloom's taxonomy that we all have been reading about, were briefed about it, maybe in our B.Ed classes also, and over again through whole lot of sessions that we have had. It had 6 major categories of knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. फिर कुछ दिन के बाद इसकी एक revised taxonomy आई, जिन्होंने पूरे ये जो noun words को verbs में बदल दिया, which turned into remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Now, what do I mean when I say, if you look at this revised version, it uses all verbs. And it is these levels help us in developing our learning outcomes very beautifully. When I talk about remembering, it actually means simply retrieving, recalling, or recognizing relevant knowledge from maybe long-term memory, right? And that is a skill that we are trying to develop in a student if we are at the very lower order thinking skill. When we come to understanding, what are we doing? We can see that the child demonstrates comprehension. It could be from one form of explanation or the other. Then when we come to applying, what does he do? He uses information or a skill for that matter in a new situation using, for example, in the remembering stage, we asked what is Newton's second law? Child is able to tell you. In understanding, he's actually able to understand the second law and how does it actually, what principle does it work on. But in applying stage, what he actually does is he solves a problem using Newton's second law. So there are, for the same syllabus of same portion of content, which level of cognitive understanding has the child come up to, is what we need to pay attention to. Coming to analyzing, what do we do in this? We break material into simple parts. There are multiple parts that we create, and all these determine how the parts will, how do actually they relate to one another, and how they actually contribute to the overall structure or the purpose of it. So this is analyzing, and then if I look at the evaluating, what do we actually do at that point of time? We are actually making judgments there. There are, for example, if I'll be assessing my own school on this SQAAF framework, I would, based on the criteria, the standards that have been put up there, I would be detecting the inconsistencies in the process or the product or the lesson plan or the policy. And I will be looking into that, I'll be making judgment, and then I'll be creating my own new plan. So when we do that with SQAAF, when we do that in our own school, we are actually already in the higher order thinking skills. We are actually evaluating our systems. We are creating new systems. We are creating improvement plans, as mentioned in the last two sessions. And how do we actually make that happen? So when we are creating, actually, we are putting elements together to a new form, in a new functional form, where it's a new whole altogether, where whether I'm writing a thesis or I'm composing a piece of music or I'm inventing a product, I'm actually creating. That's the biggest higher order thinking skill that I'm indulging in. So when you're when your child actually creates a very beautiful musical piece, please do not look down upon him. He is actually at the highest order thinking skill level. These are very lots of verbs which help us understand how we can frame our learning outcomes. Which are the verbs I use to actually understand where my learner is at this point of time. What is my hope from the learner from this lesson plan? I believe this will probably be a little small for people to read. I will just use certain words for your clarification. When we say remember, when I'm taking the child to a very lower order thinking skill, when I'm telling him to remember something, I'm basically using the verbs like tell, list, describe, relate, locate, write, find, state, name, identify, label, recall, define, recognize, match, reproduce. When I'm simply memorizing, drawing, selecting, reciting, these are all only remembering stage, thinking skill stage. When I tell the child to explain, interpret, outline, discuss, distinguish, restate, translate, describe, relate, generalize, summarize, put into your own words, or we say paraphrase, convert. So what are we actually exposing the child to? We're exposing a child to understanding. When does the child apply? When does a learner apply what the person has learned? When he's solving, showing, using, illustrating, constructing, completing, classifying, choosing to interpret something, or putting things together, making things together, change something, apply, produce, translate, calculate. That is when the application stage is. When is the child analyzing what has been given to? Of course, analyze, distinguish, examine, compare, contrast, investigate, categorize. All these verbs help us understand that we are throwing a learner into a space where his analyzing very higher order thinking skill would be assessed or gauged or practiced. When a person is evaluating, what are the verbs that tell us that evaluation stage we have reached? When we ask the learner to judge, select, choose, decide, justify, debate, verify, argue, recommend, assess, rate, prioritize, etc. Then when does the person actually create? When is the creation that has happened? What has actually happened here? When you say a child has composed something, there is a prediction that has been derived at, there's a plan that has been created, a design has been constructed, or something has been imagined, something has been proposed, something has been devised, something has been formulated, something has been combined and hypothesized, originated. So when we are forecasting a pattern, when we are doing all these, that is when, and that we are able to achieve only when we expose our children to experiments, games, songs, so self-evaluation, group discussion. So all these things become very, very important, and this tells us how important it is to expose our students to all these activities. thought I will just cover a few subject-specific skills because so many times while talking about all the skills that we talk about, yes, there are certain domain-specific skills that our teachers must pay attention to. Ben, just an example from languages, whether it's English, French, German, Hindi, Sanskrit, कुछ भी लेते हैं, किसी भी एक लैंग्वेज में हमें इन चारों की इम्पोर्टेंस दिखती है. लिसनिंग भी अगर कोई लैंग्वेज है तो लिसनिंग स्किल्स डेवलप करना बहुत ज़रूरी हो जाता है, बिकॉज लिसनिंग स्किल्स में आप जो सुन रहे हैं उसको आप कॉम्प्रिहेंड कर पाते हैं, समझ पाते हैं, क्या उसको कॉम्प्रिहेंड कर पा रहे हैं जो आप सुन रहे हैं, क्या आप अपने आप को व्यक्त कर पाते हैं, आर यू एबल टू स्पीक व्हाट यू आर योर स्पीकिंग स्किल्स एट पार, व्हेन यू आर रीडिंग समथिंग आर यू एबल टू कॉम्प्रिहेंड, are you able to reproduce and recreate and write again? So these are the LSRW, are these skills which we have been talking about since so many days. We all know about it. Likewise, there are various strands in every subject. Every subject specific has a domain. I thought I will also, since CBSE is a standard setting authority for the country, I thought I will also pick up certain parameters, certain subject strands from Cambridge board. For the maths in these Cambridge primary sections, we have maths, in which we take geometry as one of the strands, handling data as another strand, measurement and measurements as another strand, number, that is number system as another strand. So these are the various curriculum strands which come up, and which all these strands, when we actually build up a continuum, a developmental continuum for a subject, we list them according to the strands, we list them according to the level of achievements, and that is how we get a big picture. If I look at the science, we have biochemistry, physics, and we also have a scientific inquiry added to the science domain. Before I move on, I thought I will quickly take this lesson plan, which is on writing skills primarily, but let's delve deeper into it, and I would welcome as many comments in the chat box as possible. Get engaged, tell what is happening, and just express yourself. This is a writing skills class. There's an English teacher who's taking the class, and this is 7th standard, if I'm not mistaken. And the trigger question is, why do you think music is loved by so many people? First, when this question comes up, what does it actually indicate? We are actually throwing them into a totally different trigger question. We are throwing them into a totally different thought process. And then when you tell them to, if you could pick any music career, which music career would it be and why? What are you doing? In the first, what have you thrown learner to do? You've told learner to analyze his or her own thoughts. And in the second, he's reflective. He's getting into reflection mode and trying to understand, if I have to pick up a music career, which one would it be and why? In the third, choose a musical instrument of your choice and design it using eco-friendly materials. Am I exposing the child in the first, in the second, in the third step into art integration also? Am I exposing them in my fourth? When I say write a song on any theme of your choice, I am exposing a child to the creativity level of high order thinking skill, that cognitive level. And what are we doing? When we are saying that, am I combining the writing skills in this along with the creativity skills? And are we exposing our children to develop creativity skills also through this question? Then comes play a tune on your instrument and share it with the class. What is happening? Is this a art integration happening over there? Is there a multiple domains that have been, multiple subjects that have been covered in one lesson plan? At point number 6, when I say find out about at least 2 instruments that you have that you had never heard of and tabulate them. So again, what are they doing? They are researching. They're finding out more musical instruments, and they pick up those instruments which they have not heard about. They are examining, they are classifying, they are evaluating, they are choosing. So there are various cognitive levels that you're exposing a child to. Seventh, what do you think the instruments are made of? Here you are, the learner is identifying the material used. You're getting him into the facts. You're getting him into correlating the tangibles, correlating the science understanding with what is happening in the English class. Eighth, where are the singers from? How do they earn their living from it? When does it look like a very integrated lesson plan? I mean, it is a very good example of integrated lesson plan. We have brought in a social science segment to it. Here we are trying to generate a thought in the learner's mind that when you're looking at the singers, how do you think when the singing is just a pastime? Is it just a hobby? How can it be taken as a mode of learning, earning a living and things like that? Imagine you're an entrepreneur. Build your business proposal to market the instruments and provide a meaningful living to the artist in your locality. So, what have you done here? There is an entrepreneurial thought process that you have generated. There is an inclusivity that you have brought in. You are thinking about the artist in your locality. So, these are various lesson plans which generate a thought process in your mind that and this gives an exposure to the learner in multiple domains. Okay, again, a very small alphabets, but I've just put it here for you to understand where have I picked it up from. I wanted you all to pay attention to the learning outcomes at the elementary stage, which have been this, I pulled it out from an NCERT book. And here the curricular expectations are given. I remember we talked about curriculum turning into syllabus turning into the course design, course structure, or course outline, and that converts into lesson plan. So how does the curricular expectations, which are listed in our policy documents or which are listed in probably our school's curriculum policy, how does that get converted into our lesson plans? This is our elementary stage EVS curriculum, which says that children at the primary stage are expected to acquire awareness about immediate or wider surroundings through lived experiences on various themes related to daily life, that is family, plants, animals, food, water, travel, shelter, etc. And it says we have to nurture the natural curiosity and creativity for the immediate surroundings. We need to develop processes and skills, that is observation, discussion, explanation, experimentation, logical reasoning through interaction with immediate surroundings. Develop sensitivity for the natural, physical, and human resources in the immediate environment. Point out and raise issues related to equality, justice, respect for human dignity and rights. These are the curricular expectations of elementary stage under science or EVS. I am not reading this, and then that converts into the learning outcomes. This is how your learning outcome books is very well designed. If you must go through this. What are the learners, what opportunities do we provide to learner? What are the pedagogical processes that are suggested, and how are the learning outcomes achieved through that? This is what is listed in it. Through that, I come to a session of another lesson plan or another activity or another session that is happening in one of the classes. It's a small class, third standard. There is a trigger question. It says, I have 2 eyes, 2 feet, and my body is covered with feathers. Who am I? So this is how it goes on. Then you come to, the answer comes as bird. Then you correlate and then ask more thought-provoking questions. Are the feathers of each? How many birds do you need? Have you seen variety of birds? Which one have you seen? Certain flurry of questions carries on in the class, and then you have these questions. Are the feathers of each bird the same? Then now you distinguish on the basis of color, texture, size, etc. Then you come to the wings aspect of it. All birds have 2 wings, but can they all fly? So then you have the children talking about those birds. where they can, the ones which can fly, the ones which cannot fly, how can they fly? We can probably lead the conversation to bones being very light, so they're able to fly and things like that. If it's a higher class, we can even go to the aerodynamics of the birds flying and things like that. So through this, we are telling a child to create a picture book of my favorite bird, and also making child introspect, reflect why that bird is a favorite bird, or why not the other one. There's a bird feed project that you can make a child go do. What if there were no birds at all? Then you're throwing a child into that kind of thought process, that what if there were no birds at all? And then another chain of reflection point: why do some people hunt birds? What actually goes through their mind? The same lesson on birds, when it is in little higher class, it takes little different shape, where you tell to explore and tabulate and illustrate the birds that you have seen, observed, not observed. What do you think are the reasons for visibility or non-visibility? Why certain birds are not with us anymore? They are extinct. How are they different from reptiles? What if there were no birds? That was just a thought that came in the lower class. Here you're telling them to reflect upon the importance to the ecosystem. How do the birds actually contribute to the ecosystem? Now, when we say how do some people hunt, why do some people hunt birds in the lower classes? In the higher classes, you could probably help them find out certain national and international laws, organizations that prevent cruelty to animals, and you could expose them to all these kind of thoughts. And what, as a team member of a group that protects animal and birds, frame a few laws. You do not, suppose you have not yet gone into the laws. What kind of laws, if you are a part of such team, what kind of laws would you frame for your own society, where you have to for the prevention of cruelty and protection of animals and birds? So these are the kind of thought process that we generate in students' minds. We have this underwater world. Each group is told to research on underwater world. All those who want to engage on the chat box, they can give in their opinion about this. They can give their opinion. What more pointers can a teacher place in this kind of lesson? Here the pointers, when the child had to research on the underwater world, he was told. So what you see over here, though it is a learner-centric session, where learner is supposed to take the onus of his own learning, his own research work, but there's a pointer. So there's a little nudging, there is a little guidance from the teacher also. So what are the pointers that have been given? Type of flora and fauna is what you need to research on. What about the abiotic and biotic components of it? कितनी डाइवर्सिटी है आपके अंडर वाटर वर्ल्ड में? क्या कोई स्टैटिस्टिक्स अवेलेबल हैं जो कहते हैं कि ये इतने थी, अब ये नहीं है, ये एक्सटेंट हो गया है? या और कोई स्टैटिस्टिक्स है जो बताता है कि इस कॉन्टिनेंट के अंडर वाटर वर्ल्ड में, इस वाले ओशन में इस टाइप की जीव जंतु हैं, थिंग्स लाइक दैट. सो हाउ डू यू गिव पॉइंटर्स सो दैट इट इज़ अ गाइडेड रिसर्च दैट अ चाइल्ड डज? जो मैन के इंटरवेंशंस हुए, जो हमारे स्पिल्स हुए, हमारे जो ऑयल टैंकर से स्पिल्स हुए और बिगर प्रॉब्लम्स जो आए, जो यूट्रोफिकेशन चल रहा है, क्या इससे कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ रही है अंडर वाटर वर्ल्ड के जीव जंतु को? आर देयर एनी लाइवलीहुड मीन्स विच आर देयर इन द अंडर वाटर वर्ल्ड? Can we talk about that? Can you research on the ecosystem disruption that has happened? What kind of waste do we see in the ocean bed today? Can you think of solutions for it? So can we do these presentation you could use with your, so it's a group activity that I see, and there is a whole lot of research skills that are developed in the child, and empathy, and also reflection, or we are nudging a learner into a direction that your actions also impact the society and the ecosystem and the environment. Another lesson plan I have, I hope I'm not going too fast. I hope it's enough for people to gather, and time-wise we are right. Okay, so we have, there is another lesson on machines. Again, we go about, since the lesson is identify me, it was best not to disclose who's going to be which machine. There are 5 groups that I create in a class. I give lever and its types to one person, wheel and axle to another group, pulley to third group, inclined plane to the fourth group, and screw and wedge to the fifth group. So what happens? Each one has got a machine to present on. They go back, they create a handout. The handout is given to them from the teachers, and they go read out and they create their own. I see a flipped classroom happening over here. There's a pedagogical tool that a teacher has used. The students come back the next day and they are divided into 5 groups and they present according to that group. Each group, what do? The students think and share group wise. They make a list of the pulleys that they know. They make a list of wheel and axle that they know. They make a list and they do a presentation. While they're doing a presentation, they're making the rest of the people guess, who am I? Identify me. What am I? Which kind of simple machine am I? So this also, if you look at it, in the guidelines have been given where they were told, how will you present? So it has to be a guided presentation if you really want maximum learning outcomes out of these activities that you do in the classroom. The teachers tells there's a guidelines that are given to the students, to all the groups, that you introduce your object, identify the type of simple machine, point out the key identifying features so that there's a learning for the co-students who are there, and give. Yes.
आपको बैठना है तो इधर बैठ जाओ, अगर फिर डिस्टेंस
Can you just have the mic switched on? Thank you.
Please mute yourself. Kindly mute yourself. Thank you.
And how do we, when I'm identifying the key features, we also talk about the uses of these simple machines and gives a whole lot of examples. Either you carry a sample with you or talk about it or show it as a presentation. And this way, what I love at the last here is designing a simple machine of your choice. So after you have actually listen to all the presentation of all the groups, when you have been exposed to all 5 kinds of simple machines, after that you design your own simple machines, and that is here you are exposing the child to the very high level of cognitive mind development. Domain specific enough examples, are they enough when we talk about the competency based education that we're talking about? When we're talking about skilling ourselves, skilling our students, what are we actually, do we really understand what it is? When we're preparing students for 21st century, what are we actually preparing them for? Are we really preparing them with these alphabets, or are we preparing them with 3 laws of Newton, or are we preparing them, or are we creating them as people who are equipped for learning new skills? The only skill that I'm developing in a child is that person is able to learn new skill at any point of time. So what are the skills that we want to develop? Primarily, there's the most common categorization of 21st century skills that have happened. So these learning skills, if you look at it, these are the learning skills. In short, we call them 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. These 4 C's, these skills teach students about the mental processes which are required when you have to adapt and improve upon a modern work environment. When you are in a modern work environment, we really do not know what the world will look like a few decades later, a few years later probably. So what do you do? How do you equip your child? When you develop critical thinking, when you develop creativity in a child, when you teach him how to collaborate, when he's able to communicate well, what are you equipping a child to? You have developed child's mental processes, those mental processes which are required for him to adapt and of course improve upon when the modern work environment is set up. So this is what we are looking at when we're looking at a 21st century learner. What are the literacy skills? In short, we call it IMT, Information Media Technology. Now, this information media technology, what do these skills focus on? These focus on how students can recognize facts. There are a whole lot of publishing outlets, and there is, so how do you recognize that? How do you understand what is the technology behind it? There has to be a strong focus on determining trustworthy sources. How do you understand this is a trustworthy source? I can believe this. how do I, the factual information that I see, how do I know that this is factual and I can separate it from the misinformation that floods the internet today? So these are the literacy skills that we need to develop among our students. And then, of course, the life skills. How flexible we are, what are the leadership qualities that we have? Are we initiative taker? Are we risk taker? What kind of productivity levels do we bring in whenever we are working? What are the social skills like? Are my interpersonal skills strong? How do I develop these life skills? If you look at these skills, what are these? These are very intangible elements. How do you pinpoint these? But these are the intangible elements. They are there in everyday life. You got to, they are both, they are going to impact your personal as well as professional lives. They are the ones who are going to, all these skills together, learning skills, literacy skills, and life skills, they are all going to contribute to the future of the child. And when we are doing this, are we getting them into our skill in our lesson plans? Are we actually putting them at the forefront that we need to devise our lesson plans, we need to devise our curriculum, we need to bring in those activities into our ACPP or a planner or the activity planner where we actually expose or our students into this. If I look at this, the next one, just a simple act of showing any video. After you've shown any video, a simple question like, do you like this video? Yes, no, whatever. Why do you like it? Or why do you not like it? All these kind of questions post viewing the video helps generation in critical thinking. These critical thinking skills develop when we simply put certain questions. They can be part of your everyday thing, everyday session, day-to-day questions that you put up to your in your classroom situations. Suppose there's a question, there's another question that we can put up after this. What words would you use to describe the video? What are you doing over here? You're, of course, critically analyzing what went wrong with the video or what went right with the video. What did you like in it? And then you are drawing expressions from your thought process and bringing it into the words, whether you're taking in the video form, written form or the oral form. And then after you've seen the video, how do you reinterpret what you have seen? How do you summarize the message that has been given? A simple act like this of say 2-minute video with certain questions like this, maybe the entire exercise of 6 to 7 minutes is going to be of some value. We talked about IMT, we talked about literacy skills and how do we, the biggest place where I see the importance of developing literacy skills is how do we spot the fake news? How do we actually know that this is the fake news? How do we actually know that it wasn't a fact? It seemed like a fact. It was very close to the truth, but it wasn't. Did I check on the source? Where did it come from? Whenever there is a WhatsApp forward that comes to us, do we question the source? Do we understand where has this come from? Do we actually investigate a little more, or we just believe what has come to us? Do we read beyond the headlines? When we look at the newspaper, the eye-catching headlines sometimes tell a totally different story, though the headlines are not supposed to do that, but sometimes they do. So what is the whole story behind that picture? We did talk about the whole story behind a picture yesterday in the session. What is the whole story behind that headlines? Do we actually read beyond it? Did we check the author? We did a quick search and we just started talking about it, especially in the world of Wikipedia. Are we actually looking at the authenticity? Are there any supporting sources to it? Have you actually looked into it? So many times, especially nowadays in WhatsApp, you see certain picture over there where you realize, oh, this picture is old. This is not of this tsunami that came and it was of that years and things like that. So basically, spotting a fake news, helping students spot a fake news is one skill that we really, really need to concentrate on. I just thought I will talk about one. I was in one of the schools and I found a very, very beautiful practice by that school. They just used to simply on one of the days in a month, I think one day in a month or once in fortnight, they had bought 25 wheelchairs. And for that particular day, there used to be 25 people who would be chosen, and they had to spend the entire day on that wheelchair. And I found this exercise to be so beautiful because it brought in inclusivity. It brought in empathy. I could empathize. I could understand what a person who was probably had to use the wheelchair because of the disability that he or she was in. How do I, as a normal student who's so-called physically fit student in the school, how do I look into that? So what kind of events are you actually putting in your planner? Are they actually fostering inclusive environment? Are they fostering any other culture that you would want your student to be in? Now there is another this lesson which is actually on pollution, but it builds up a reflective learner. We did talk about the kind of learners that we want in our classroom, right? So when we're doing a pollution, there is when you look at something, suppose there's a video that has been played on pollution, and or maybe some narration, some narrative, some article, something has been just shared with by the teacher, maybe a lesson, maybe a lesson from your textbook has been read to the students, and then these questions, you all had to, each learner had to kind of reflect and tell, what did I enjoy in this? What did I learn from this? How will this help me in daily life? Am I actually going to make use of what I've learned today? What do I do at my level? What changes can I make in my own lifestyle, in my own habits, which can avoid polluting the air and water? What changes can I bring about in my lifestyle? So there are a whole lot of reflection that is happening after the session. Yes, there's a learning science domain, scholastic purpose of teaching what was being taught has been taught. But what do I also pick up while in the process? When I reflect, maybe it might impact my own attitude. So there is attitudinal changes that might come in after I have finished with this lesson. There is very small classrooms. How do we make sure, do we keep tracking that I have asked question to every student? Am I looking at the whether every child has there are a whole lot of ways in which you can do it. There is a teacher who does it this way, that she divides the students in four corners and she gives them one card each of from a pack of card, one for clubs, एक चिड़ी का पत्ता दे देती है, एक स्पेड्स का यानी हुक्म का पत्ता दे देती है, एक पान का पत्ता दे देती है, और एक what is it, diamond ईंट का. So what happens is he says, okay, when I'm doing this spinner, when I this is a participation spinner, when I move this needle, ये जहाँ आके रुकेगा वहाँ से कोई आंसर करेगा. So basically, she's just putting in certain new ideas in her classroom. She's raising the equity. She's seeing that most of the students are able to take part. And these are very small 60-second strategies which are helping you generate even a simple pause. It is said that if you bring in just about 5 seconds pause into the difference between the question and answer, you say that I'm going to ask a question now, and you just simply wait for 10 seconds before the first hand comes up. That 10 seconds of pause between the question and the answers from the student itself brings in a lot of value. It brings in pause. You're able to process your thought. There is a patience that comes in the child. When you process that thought, and when you have weighed your answer, when you're reproducing your answer, when you're giving out your answer, you're already little more processed. After processing in your mind, you're better in your answers. So these are small techniques. There is one technique of pom-pom jar, it is called, where a teacher used to place a jar in her classroom, and she used to have whole lot of these kind of balls or pom-poms or whatever. I preferably like pom-poms better because there's no harm with it, and also they are warm and fudgy and beautiful. So I love to correlate it with the kindness. So these pom-pom jars, she just placed it there, and she did one session on kindness. What exactly kindness means? Kindness, what is kindness? Kindness is if I help out a child, my friend, if I share my tiffin, or the person was struggling with this sum, I taught this sum to her, this problem sum to her, things like that. So after explaining the kindness, and says, okay, now each time you carry out certain acts of kindness in your class, you simply pick up a pom-pom jar, pom-pom ball, and put it in this pom-pom jar. This is all they had to do. And then each time this was done, wherever the child was, whenever the child was doing this, he or she had to explain why he or she thinks it was a kindness, act of kindness. So I felt these kind of activities do a lot to us, bring a lot of learning in us. Okay, now I will just pick up one standard 1.1.4, if you could also look into this. I don't want to read it fully, but then this is the strand which, this is the standard which talks about curriculum. Does your curriculum develop skills and abilities which prepare students for lifelong learning, fosters global citizenship, leading to attainment of social sustainable development goals? Primarily speaking about sustainability in education. So we did talk about 21st century skills. I have covered all those things before I came to this standard, so that you are able to correlate and understand what standard are we talking about. And what does this standard mean? When I talk about school is aware of recommendation, when I say the school is leaders have oriented the teachers to learning outcomes, when we say that school identifies the required skills to be the enhanced among these students at every stage. My timetable and calendar reflects this 21st century skills. My ACPP and calendar reflects provision of opportunities, and it reflects more innovative means for students. It does demonstrate 21st century skills. Am I working towards the attainment of SDGs? Have I given enough opportunities to my children in various district level, intra school level, etc.? Is my ACP developed differently as per the stages of the structuring that the NEP has done, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4? Do my student participate in various competitions? Am I exposing at least 50% of my students into problem solving skills, logic reasoning skills, and other 21st century skills kind of competitions? Do I create such opportunities when my staff as well as student interact with one another, with other schools, with other educational institutions at various level, maybe till international level as well? क्या हम ये कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि जो हमारे स्कूल की टीम है, क्या हर रेगुलर इंटरवल पे आपस में मिलती है और इवैल्यूएट करती है कि जो हमारी एक्टिविटीज़ हैं उनका लर्नर आउटकम पे क्या इम्पैक्ट हो रहा है? क्या हम इम्पैक्ट कर पा रहे हैं अपने सारे जो पॉलिसीज़ हमने बनाई, या जो हमने एक्टिविटीज़ अपने प्लान में डाली, या हमने जो भी एक्सपोजर दिया अपने स्टूडेंट्स को वेरियस कॉम्पिटिशन में, कहीं पे भेजा, कोई कॉम्पिटिशन कराया, चाहे वो क्लास में कराया, चाहे स्कूल के बाहर ले जाके कराया, क्या हमने उनको अपनी इन एक्टिविटीज़ के थ्रू क्या उनके लर्नर आउटकम को इम्पैक्ट किया? ये सब हमें हर समय सोचते रहना है. क्या इन सब करने के लिए क्या हम टीचर्स को इम्पैक्ट का मेंटर करते रहें कि नहीं? And these are the suggested documents that has been placed when you're trying to review yourself on, say, let's say on this particular standard. So what do you look into? क्या तुम्हारा ACCP, हमारे जो स्कूल का ACCP बना था, क्या वो रिफ्लेक्ट कर रहा है ये सारी चीज़ें जो यहाँ पे बोली गई हैं, ये जो सारे परफॉर्मेंस इंडिकेटर लिस्ट हुए हैं? चिंता मत करिए किस लेवल पे आज आप हैं, जिस भी लेवल पे हैं उससे नेक्स्ट को एस्पायर करिए. So if I land up in level 1, I aspire to reach level 2 in what time? Have I given myself a time frame? Have I given myself the actionable points? एक extract यहाँ पे है एक extract है ये ACCPP का, जिसमें एक स्कूल ने अपने लिए एक actionable point बनाया है that I will create opportunities for students learning and innovation. So what are my steps for that? Where are we now? What do we do in coming year? What will we achieve what we want to do? How will we achieve what we want to do? Who is responsible for it? How do we do that? What is the timeline for the implementation and what will the impact look like? मतलब मैंने ये किया, पहले तो चेक किया कि मैं कहाँ हूँ आज की डेट पे, क्या मैंने इंट्रोड्यूस कर दी कॉम्पिटेंसी बेस्ड एप्लीकेशन बेस्ड लर्निंग? स्टेप 1 में हम आज की डेट में ये वाला जो स्कूल है कह रहा है मैंने कॉम्पिटेंसी बेस्ड एप्लीकेशन बेस्ड लर्निंग इंट्रोड्यूस कर दी अपने स्कूल में। एक्सपीरियंशियल और हैंड्स ऑन लर्निंग भी इंट्रोड्यूस कर दी है। कुछ प्लेटफॉर्म्स मैंने क्रिएट किए हैं जो एक्सपोज किए हैं बच्चों को इनोवेशंस के लिए। थोड़ा और स्पेसिफिक हो जा सकते थे यहाँ पे। वी आर इन्वाइटिंग एक्सपर्ट्स, कह रहे हैं कि हम अपने एक्सपर्ट्स और मेंटर्स को भी गाइड करने के लिए बुलाते हैं और एक्सपीरियंशियल लर्निंग के लिए इंटर्नशिप प्रोवाइड करते हैं। स्टेप 2 वो क्या क्या करना चाहता है? वो स्कूल कहता है कि अगले साल इन द कमिंग ईयर मैं और क्या करना चाहता हूँ। We need to provide more opportunities to work on project dealing with world real problems and design solution for it. Widen students' horizon and perspective by inviting more experts. So this is how the entire ACCP has been drawn. ये सिर्फ एक एग्जाम्पल पुल आउट किया है, एक पेज यहाँ से पुल अप किया है और ये भी बताया है कि यहाँ पे क्या टाइमलाइन में सोचा है कि ये मेरा पूरा होगा ये काम। मार्च 2020 पुराना ACCP का एग्जाम्पल है ये। सो दिस इज व्हाट इट इज एंड वो कह रहा है कि अगर मैंने ये अचीव कर लिया इसका इम्पैक्ट क्या होगा। मेजरेबल impact is also very very important, otherwise how do we know what we set out for has been achieved? So ये impact लगेगा कैसा? क्या the impact में वो स्कूल लिखता है ATL lab will be functional in about 80% of academic year and 60% students should have clear understanding about innovation. So it is, if I look at the numeric numbers, it's a very very quantifiable impact. But how do you actually innovate, understand, how do you actually gauge that the student will understand about innovation is again a question mark. At school will have to work little more on understanding this. Just an example to give an insight. How does your lesson plan and flow look like if you are trying to embed all these learner skills profile, if you really want to build up the learner profile that we are wanting to build? When you have this mind map, what does mind map help in? We all understand that it helps in getting our thoughts onto paper. So how does a mind map, when I'm going to start a lesson plan, when I'm going to plan something, what is actually going through my mind? How do I put it down in a paper? When I create this mind map, suppose in the center space, of course, my topic will come, which I'm going to teach if it's a mind map for a lesson plan. So what do I connect it with? Of course, I will connect it with the teaching methodology. I'll connect it with the resources that I'm going to use. I'm going to connect it with the all these radiating arms are going to connect me with the various aspects of content, various aspects of competencies that I want to build through this lesson plan. Now, if my lesson plan starts like this, I want to pay special attention to the journal objectives. When a school in their own lesson plan diary, teacher's diary or facilitator's journal, whatever you may call it, अगर वो खुद पहले से कहता है कि जनरल ऑब्जेक्टिव्स आप ब्लूम्स टैक्सोनॉमी के वर्ब्स को यूज करके लिखिए, सो इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ अ नज दैट द डायरी, that the blank page of the diary, which is still to be filled up by the teacher, that there is a simple nudge to that teacher from the diary that please do phrase or do frame your learning outcomes using the verbs which are the Bloom's taxonomy. By default, a teacher looks into that sheet, goes back into the hierarchy, cognitive levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and looks into what kind of lesson, what kind of outcomes am I expecting from this lesson. So that is what I see, something nice in this particular sheet. And I like something, if you look at right at the bottom, it says prerequisite, what students know. So what is it that the students already know before this lesson? So which is the link between it? If I'm talking about, suppose there's a lesson which I'm going to take up on a problem sums or a higher application sums on going back to the same topic of inertia, the laws of inertia and things like that. So does my child already know what the law is? So basically, what the child already knows will tell us what is the prior knowledge of the child, and teacher can then provide a scaffolding of learning from that pre-knowledge to the new knowledge that will come to a child. And the entire lesson flow has been created in such a way that there is, in the part of facilitation, you have the trigger question. You tell the teacher that please plan a trigger question. So again, a teacher is nudged into thinking of a trigger question to make her sessions thought-provoking or interesting. What resource or the tool she's going to use, what TLN she's going to use, is she planning on AFL? What are the in-class questions she's going to put in, which are going to be assessment for learning? Are we, if you look at this, the assessments are being braided with the lesson. I think Kalpa ma'am also talked about it yesterday. How do you make sure that your lessons are designed in such a way that there are inbuilt questions in it? So, of course, the learner outcome when it comes, how does this general objectives or the outcomes differentiate from here? Here, what is seen or what is told, it is, I see, it is indicating portfolio. That means it is connected with the portfolio. When a teacher goes through this session, she kind of knows there will be certain visible outcomes that will come out of it. She kind of knows there will be certain artifacts that will come out, that will get generated from it, which will mirror the entire learning journey of the child. So can I pick it up and place it in my portfolio later? This is what this teacher diary indicates. And of course, and the closure, how do you plan the closure of the chapter? How do you cater for accommodation? Do you actually cater for not just the struggling learners? Are you also catering for the gifted children? What are you providing little extra time to certain children? Are your students going to work in partnership? Have you thought of certain support strategies? So what is the accommodation that you have planned? Talk about it. While we are doing this, is my the entire objective is moving from temporary memory to permanent knowledge. So how do we actually make our sessions that impactful that it builds the permanent knowledge in child's mind? So if you look at this, right at the end, there is a reflection, right in the middle, if you see, there's a reflection of teacher. That teacher also kinds of goes through that PDCA cycle that we learned about in the first session and second session. And she checks herself through reflection and what went well, what did not go well, what can be thought for the future. So what do I actually, how do I, this works as a feed forward from him to herself, from him to himself, from her to herself. And this creates a reflective teacher. And of course, we all know that reflection always helps in improving our processes. And right at the end, if you look at the checklist, if you look at the lesson flow, right, extreme right, there is a column for code. So this code indicates the checklist here. So while I was designing my lesson, you don't have to include them all, but this is the checklist that tells you, have I done an art integration here? Have I brought it? Have you worked towards the communication skills? Have I tried to work towards collaboration skills? Is this particular lesson going to generate, going to impact the critical thinkings of the child? So various skills have been listed here. That doesn't mean that every lesson is going to include all of these. Some can be, few could be probably listed out here. And this also works as a checklist that I have covered art integration in my first lesson plan. Let me bring in the knowledge here. Let me bring in the scientific temperament here. Let me bring in the subject. So this is the kind of checklist, which again speaks very high of the school, because then you're nudging the teacher into looking into it. I will go very fast. I'm mindful of the time. I rather save the time for question answer session. Little reflection. We all are aware of this 4 hours. It has been repeated 2 times already. These are the driving questions for school when you're trying to look into a standard and you're trying to reflect into your practices and you're reviewing your process and you're seeing what I need to do to respond to that situation. How do I actually create my improvement plans on the basis of this? It could be specific to standard. I have worked on the standard 1.1.4. What are the questions that you can generate for yourself? You can ask as different questions from yourself. You can have a committee set and plan what are the lacuna, what are the gaps in the system that we have in our school today. So when the leader sits with the core team, what happens? She applies a system thinking approach. It could be 4 hours, it could be PDCA model, it could be some other system approach that you are more comfortable with. It could be something that you've learned prior to these sessions. Just pick up any and just try to understand. Using that format, ask yourself when you're reflecting on your processes you're looking at, for specifically suppose you're trying to see the 1.1.4 standard, so you look into it by asking questions. What's my diary format like? Do the lesson plans achieve learning outcomes? Have I really catered for it? Do I plan it in my planning? Where are the student outcomes? Have I listed them? Are they visible on boards, projects, assignments, participation events, whatever am I doing? Are they visible? Are there regular classroom observations to review achievement of defined learning outcomes? If I've set out for this, are there any class observation which help teacher understand whether she's able to achieve what she set out to achieve? Are there regular feedback and feed forward to the teachers? Am I doing that enough as a leader? When I have done certain PDPs, when I actually understood that these are the professional development program that I need to bring in, I look into my lesson plan and realize that probably my teachers are not well equipped with the IMT, not well equipped with the 21st century skills, the 4Cs. Do I plan a session for them? After I plan the session for them, after they have gone through this PDP, are these outcomes reflected in the lesson plan that are made by the teachers post that session? So is there enough handholding and mentoring that are happening for the teachers? So all these things help me carry out a need analysis, and then I create an improvement plan for myself. Firstly, I rate myself. After I've done all this analysis, I look at this and I say, oh my God, I think I need to do a lot. So in the domain 1 curriculum, specifically to the standard 1.1.4, I think I really need to look at the skills that I'm targeting at in my school. क्या मैं और भी skills की teaching अच्छी करा सकती हूँ अपने school में? क्या मेरे teachers उस teaching को कराने के लिए equipped हैं? लग रहा है कि मेरी level of maturity 1 है, कोई बात नहीं, हम बहुत जल्दी एस्पिरेशन लेवल मेरा 2 है, मैं 4 पे आज नहीं जाऊंगी, आराम से काम करूंगी। अभी कुछ महीने के लिए मैंने अपने लिए रखा है, मैंने अपने लिए 2 मंथ्स का टाइम दिया है। अगर आप देखेंगे टाइमलाइन जाएंगे एक्सट्रीम राइट में, मैं बोलती हूँ कि मैं गैप एनालिसिस किया, मैंने पूरा गैप एनालिसिस करूंगी, चेक करूंगी कि मुझे क्या क्या सेशन लेने हैं अपने टीचर्स के लिए, कहाँ इक्विप करना है, वो मैं गैप एनालिसिस 1 वीक में पूरा करूंगी। एंड इफ आई लुक एट दी CBPs, the competency building program that I'll bring in, वो 2 months तक चलेंगे, and after that I think I will be able to get my teacher diary format. I will be able, in the proper plan, I will be able to deliver my lessons according to the plan, and I will be able to cater for various skills in this plan. And I realize that my teachers need capacity building for 21st century skills, and maybe to certain extent competency based education also. So I will carry out these, and then मेरा सब जो पूरा कैलेंडर है फिर से मैं रिव्यू करूंगी। मैं कोई भी अपना तरीका यूज़ कर सकती हूँ, कोई भी सिस्टम अप्रोच यूज़ कर सिस्टम थिंकिंग अप्रोच यूज़ कर सकती हूँ। मैं 5 Ws and 1 H यूज़ कर सकती हूँ जो शांति मैम ने पहले सेशन में दिया, या मैं PDCA मॉडल और या 4 hours यूज़ कर सकती हूँ, या काइजन वाला कर लूँ, या कोई भी जो मैंने पहले से आई एम मोर इक्विप्ड और मोर अंडरस्टैंड दैट बेटर. What we have over here are the levels of various performance indicators. कैसे हमें पता चला कि जो मेरा सिस्टम था स्पेसिफिक टू 1.14 के जब मैंने बात की तो वहाँ पे मैं उस लेवल पे आई. Overall, if I look at my system, at what stage am I? If I'm at level 1, that means I'm at inceptive stage. I'm still at the initial stage, and practices are only individual based. That teacher is really interested in teaching. She does well. The other teacher, she's just buying her time. She's not able to teach well. I haven't given any direction from my side. As a leader, I haven't really created that process, created that atmosphere, created that space, created that learning space. Probably I need to get into transient phase now. Is my system only in the constructive years today? Are the practices generally corrective in nature? I'm just firefighting. I'm just solving problem as it comes to me. Or am I doing beyond? Are my database improvement processes, the entire improvement process, are there evidences there? Is the system well defined and documented? Am I actually data driven person, data informed person? Am I looking at the evidences? Am I improving my system? Are my people aware of their roles in the institution? Are they actually, what are their KRAs? Are they practicing it? Are the practices preventive and corrective in nature, या firefighting हो रही है. So we'll have to keep looking at what are our systems, and that will tell us at what level are we at. When you are at dynamic and evolving stage, that level tells us that you are actually demonstrating strong, benchmark, defined, and documented processes. Governance and leadership exhibits accountability, responsibility, self-evaluation, and improvement planning. So that is, be very truthful. It's a self-assessment. Understand at what level you are, and maybe in one standard you will be at level 3, and another you'll be at level 1, and maybe at some you'll be at level 4. So that will give you the individualized improvement plan specific to your school, and that school improvement plan will help you actually specifically to curriculum. If you look at it, there's a picture that is being used in Prayog project also, which talks about all these segment. We did talk about the interconnectedness of all the points that are listed here. If we are truly a real pedagogical leader, then we are looking into all these aspects of competency-based education, experiential learning, arts integrated learning. We are involved in storytelling, sports integrated learning. We are paying attention to inclusive education, environmental education, competency-based assessment we are carrying out. There's no hard separation between academics and skill education. Peer education and life skills comes hand in hand. Safal, you all are exposed to this wonderful initiative. And of course, we are in webinar of SQAAF framework. Our HPCs, the holistic progress cards, reflecting of the learning outcomes, the competency-based assessment will reflect whether the competency-based teaching is happening in the school. So all in all, there's a when the first session finished and the resource people were together analyzing the first, and we were analyzing the remarks which had come in the chat box. We specifically liked one remark, and we derived a mantra out of it, or a tagline out of it, which said that somebody said SQAAF se dar nahi lag raha hai, something like that. SQAAF is not really. There is no fear of SQAAF anymore after this session, which was very nice. The resource person was wonderful. So we brought out a tagline from it, and we said that SQAAF se khauf nahi. So we just want to communicate to all of you here that spirit of SQAAF is actually very encouraging. It is just a tool for self-assessment and to a certain extent peer assessment. So make use of it, and thank you for your time. Thank you. I know I've left very just about 15 minutes for question answer time. But however, we have a team of resource person here. I'll request Shanti ma'am, Kalpana ma'am, also Deepa if she's around, to be alert and any questions coming our way.
Yes, Rita. There have been a lot of appreciations coming up. Very impressive, informative, excellent, and very wonderful. All of that. Congratulations to you. Yeah, but there's one question. Somebody wants to know what is the ideal score of SQAAF?
Oh.
What would be the ideal score? This is asked by Mr. Sudhish Srivastava. And also he wants to know whether there is any lesson plan in Hindi that could be shared.
Sorry, I had one, and when I realized the thing was getting too lengthy, that is the only one I removed. I'm sorry about that. I wish I had kept it. Yes, there will be so many, and I'm sure they'll come in as an exemplar. And like it is told each time, do write to SQAAF on the SQAAF email ID. We could probably share some. And talking about the score that you talked about, frankly, like I said, in one standard you may be low, in other you may be high. It is all your own self-assessment. So where you want to be, why talk about the wholesome one score for the school? You are probably doing a lot in your sports field. Maybe you're integrating it in your lesson plans. There's a sports integrated studies that are happening. Probably the art integration hasn't happened. Or probably your curriculum is doing very well, but then assessment still has to take shape. And they still have to reflect all the learning outcomes and the skills that you have taught in your school. So I would say we are in a very nascent stage. We are still kind of assessing ourselves. Understand the framework 100%. Process all your go through all your process, review it, and understand. You will realize that you are at a different level. So there is no perfect score here. We are evolving every time. It's a continual learning.
Yeah, I think so. You have rightly said. Then there is one question where a lot of people want to know whether they can get this PPT.
I think this the same question has come up in our previous sessions also, and CBSE each time has been telling that this particular recording, which is live right now, will stay on the YouTube channel of CBSE Academic. You could view it anytime, and whatever you want to extract from there, you're welcome to extract.
And the one Everest Knowledge School has been asking whether can you show a sample teaching model? Can it also be shared in this? That's what they are wanting to know.
We did show a sample teaching model in a way, but then what topic are you talking about? Because this is kind of a awareness drive. These 13 sessions of webinars are kind of awareness drive, and it is making you aware of the framework and how to use it, and how do you improve your processes with those performance indicators in mind. That is the large purpose. When we showed few lesson plans, that was to clarify the understanding of the various skills that we are talking about. Okay. So when you, there's no exemplary lesson plan. The exemplary lesson plan is the one which is able to achieve what it set out for. हम क्या करना चाहते हैं, क्या हम लर्निंग आउटकम्स हम अचीव करना चाहते थे, क्या हमने सारी उससे रिलेटेड, और जितनी ज़्यादा आप इंटीग्रेटेड लर्निंग करेंगे, कोशिश करें मल्टी डिसिप्लिनरी करें, मल्टीपल सब्जेक्ट डोमेन्स को कवर करें, मल्टीपल स्किल्स डेवलप करने वाले लेसन प्लान्स को, वही एक एग्जाम्पलरी लेसन प्लान हो जाता है.
Again, this bilingual thing, somebody says it should have been only in Hindi.
Only in Hindi.
Back and forth on that. So I think we wanted to have both of them. I think it's very
ये देखो हमारा शहर बहुत बड़ा है, जिसने भी ये लिखा है, मैं समझ सकती हूँ आपकी बात. हमारा देश बहुत बड़ा है, और हम सब जानते हैं कि इसकी डाइवर्सिटी कितनी डाइवर्स है. तो लैंग्वेजेस की ही डाइवर्सिटी नहीं, हर तरह की डाइवर्सिटी है. जब हम बाइलिंगुअल अपने लेसन्स की बात करते हैं, तो हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं बाइलिंगुअल लाने का, पर कल किसी ने बोला था कि सब इंग्लिश में होना चाहिए, आज आप कह रहे हैं सब हिंदी में बोलना चाहिए. पहले दिन किसी ने बोला था बाइलिंगुअल होना चाहिए. रादर द वेरी फर्स्ट वन वाज प्योर इंग्लिश, एंड वी ट्राई टू ब्रिंग इट टू बाइलिंगुअल बिकॉज ऑफ दैट. So we are trying to.
There's also a question, Rita, regarding whether you can share a pedagogical plan. I think that's going to be handled by Kalpana ma'am tomorrow, right?
Kalpana ma'am is going to, because we are taking part 2 of this domain, and pedagogy would be talked about tomorrow. And we have a very wonderful resource person. We all have learned from her and Shanti ma'am. So what I'm trying to say is, you stay tuned to all the webinars. And if you think you're busy at the time when it goes live, please take it as a self-paced module and watch the YouTube whenever you want to and understand. So there'll be enough exemplars, enough samples that will be shared, like it was shared today, tomorrow also.
There's one question they're asking whether the resources that you used that can be available, whether those resources can be available.
Yeah, they can be. We'll go. You can speak to CBSE for it. They can take a call on that. It's all out and open for everybody to. We are here to share best practices. We are here to share our best tools. We are here to share our learning.
So there's one Mr. Arnab Mukherjee also says, Rita, whether the checklist that there could be available somewhere. The checklists are very useful, whatever you showed. Where can we get the idea of the exhaustive checklists?
Mr. Mukherjee, if you look into the SQAAF, the framework itself, when you look into the curriculum planning portion of it, and if you go through everything I picked up is from SQAAF. So you will, if you actually go through the framework, you will get all these. They are there available in the competency-based circular that came from CBS. It is there in the learning outcomes of NCERT, which is there. So all has been extracted from the policy documents that have come from our apex bodies.
Yeah, and people have appreciated that wheelchair exercise for sensitizing children. So some Mrs. Rekha suggested even for blind, deaf, dumb, that kind of thing could be taken up. They've suggested, appreciated that. And, again, a lot of people are asking about certificates from CBSE for participating in the webinar. Are they going to get certificates? I think CBSE, they don't have plans to give that right now. Anjali ma'am or Samiksha ma'am can answer that, whether there are going to be certificates. Kalpana ma'am, what do you think?
I think this is a self-reflective exercise, and a lot of motivation that's coming from within. So, and we would like to do something even if we don't get a certificate for it. I mean, I'm looking at it that way, that what we are going to get as certificates would be our children. We're equipped with those skills, armed with the skills that we've been talking about, and going out into the world well empowered. That's our certificate we should look at.
Ma'am, you have to answer this one question from Jayita Dasgupta. She says teachers across the nation are asking this question on behalf of them. Where is the time to do what is expected after 32 periods, leading assemblies and learning, leading clubs and doing dispersal after attending meetings, etc., etc. Please motivate them. You have to inspire them.
So I
Okay.
think the leader, the head of the institution has to. I mean, I reflect back onto the circular of CBSE, which says that principals have to turn to pedagogical leader. So yes, something went wrong in our processes. We became too much of operational person, and we do realize that only the principal, the academic head, can be the pedagogical leader. So we could probably separate the operations and probably hire bursars and admin officers and let them do all that stuff, and let the teachers and principals concentrate on the change in the scenario, in the academic scenario.
Yeah. Someone is also asking from RKM Ashrama School, is it not better that we have offline training?
Believe you me, we have already done so many. This is the group of mentors. I've already traveled so many cities, and but you know the population, you know the number of schools, you know what is the strength of what is the volume that we are talking about. So offline would be there, but it will be slower. So certain online, so that the awareness, so that the percolation of the information and the what SQAAF frame is all about, how it can really be used as a good tool. And any you want to add to this, Kalpana ma'am?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think online we are using we are leveraging.
If it is okay, I can pitch in. See,
Yes,
there are a lot of mentors developed, and
Mm.
even at the introductory session, it was mentioned that they can write to CBSE. And CBSE will organize a support system. Handholding will be done with the school through a mentor. That is possible. So the last address now, for this address, you can note it down, which Rita ma'am is sharing with you. It has not come in the YouTube, but I suppose it will take a few minutes to come. And there you can note it down and contact them. So I'm sure they will do a lot of help in that. And somebody is asking, I forgot the name. It says, what is the one statement that you want to talk about art in education?
Saying what? I didn't get the question.
About art education, what you want to mention in a few lines. That's what they're saying. What is art education in the curriculum?
See, when we're talking about integrate, of course, I'll request Kalpana ma'am also to elaborate beyond what I say. When we are talking about any integrated lesson plans for that matter, we are trying to bring in multiple learning outcomes out of it. So when we are trying to develop certain competencies, certain skills, we are trying to integrate art also in it. And how do you benefit from it? We feel that the educationists feel that the art forms, or when we are creating something, that is the highest level, highest order of thinking skill that is generated at that point of time. And in any case, because of its the aesthetic part of it, or it kind of excites the other left brain, and there is a balancing of left and right brain also happens. So what happens is that there is a more learning happening, there is a more balanced learning happening, and there is a more feel good factor attached to that learning. So that is I think the purpose of it. If my knowledge is limited, I will request other people also to chip in.
Somebody has come out with a nice suggestion. They say that the best practices on CBSE web may be shared so that everybody can get to learn about different things. I think that's a good idea.
That's a very good idea.
That's
I
a very
think.
good idea. We can think about it. And they also, there's a teacher who's asking about, explain about micro teaching.
Okay, that's a pedagogical question. If Kalpana ma'am can cover that in tomorrow's session.
I think it will be covered tomorrow. So please join us at tomorrow at 3 o'clock. You
Okay,
can hear a lot about it. You have an authority on the subjects. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. The micro teaching method. That's I think probably she will be covering it tomorrow. And also there are requests for lesson plans. Lesson plans to be shared. More lesson plans. So probably we can think about how to do it if we want to put up.
I
Lesson
have a
plans.
feeling that firstly, if I think everybody goes through these 13 sessions and all the Prayog sessions and other sessions that CBSE is coming up with, they will be more equipped. And why take somebody's lesson plan? It is always better to create one of your own. So it will be more important for you to understand what are learning outcomes, how are they achieved, what processes will make a teacher reach there. So basically, if you concentrate on the what is, where is, why is, I think it is better than just kind of copying a good lesson plan. One might give a very good, beautifully designed lesson plan if you can't really understand the heading of it, or if your teachers have not really gone through those sessions, it doesn't help.
One last question, ma'am. I think we are closing to almost near 5 o'clock. How often we should do the review? That's what is asked here. How often we should take up the review? Ma'am, maybe you can answer that.
I think
Am I audible? Rita, ma'am?
Yeah, I'll take
Question:
it. Yeah.
How often one should take up SQAA review?
See, basically, I think the review should be on the areas where you found lacunae. So if I've covered, say, my curricular areas and I found I need to work on that, I will review that immediately after I have, suppose I made an improvement plan after my review. An improvement plan was created as a response and I started working on it. And I would review that again. So depending on which portion were you working on, you keep reviewing it. You don't have to review yourself on the score all over again every time. My voice is echoing, I hope.
Yeah, your voice is echoing, ma'am. Even mine is echoing. I think we wind up, ma'am. Kalpana, ma'am.
There were a lot of last 2 minutes, if I may. Dipanshu is all ready to wind up. So last 2 minutes, where I think a lot of, as Shanti ma'am has already said, Rita ma'am, there are a lot of great examples that somebody has written, amazing, excellent illustrations, superb explanations, uh, and creative writing examples, music and dance they were relating to. So what I loved was that they were also correlating it to their own practices. And many of them were sharing their own ideas and observations. They found it a lot of clarity, and also questions on how competencies are related to learning outcomes and what is competency based pedagogy that we can take up tomorrow. And one of the questions was also on what about those children who cannot cope up with the group mates? So we'll park these questions for tomorrow and take them up. I think they all loved the various examples and it was pretty exhaustive. So one of them said, there's too much of information, but it's so amazing that we'll try and assimilate it. So I think with that note, we'll really love to thank you, Rita ma'am, Shanti ma'am, Deepa ma'am, who's
And
also
Kalpana
been
ma'am.
working behind the scenes to collate all the questions together. And thank you for the audience who's been so participative and have given a lot of positive inputs. I loved one statement. It got lost somewhere, but Ashish Gupta ji, next time we meet, you deserve a chocolate.
What is it?
He's written so cutely that can you provide a PDF so that I can read, revise, and implement in my school, in my teaching? So that I found so cute, that you're willing to, you're open to it, you're willing to learn, and very cutely written, read, revise, and implement. So thank you, Ashish, for that. That gives us hope that nothing is impossible. It may seem very huge, and as Joita's question, it may seem that way, but I think nothing is impossible if, as Rita ma'am said, the operational elements a little in terms of our focus on the knowledge part gets cut down, and the focus on skills and attitudes becomes a little more. So is that it, Shanti ma'am, Deepa ma'am? You
Yes,
can
ma'am.
say thank you to Rita ma'am too
Thank you,
for the
Rita.
lovely session.
Very well.
It was amazing. Amazing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
CBSE, for the
And for the
opportunity.
rest of the system closing, we have to follow a system, right? There is a system flow. And at the end of that SOP and the flow chart is our good old Dipanshu, who's waiting for his turn there. Thank you, Dipanshu, for all the help, and Samiksha for all the help. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Esteemed guests, resource persons, and participants, as we reach the end of this enriching webinar, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. Your active participation has been instrumental in making this event at a huge success. A special thanks to Joint Secretary Ma'am, Dr. Shweta Singh. Your presence has added immense prestige to this event. We are truly honored by your support and encouragement, and your valuable contributions have inspired us all to strive for excellence. Now, let's give a big round of applause to our awesome IT team. They work tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure this webinar runs smoothly. Their dedication deserves all the appreciation. And how can we forget our incredible resource persons, Mrs. Rita ma'am, Shanti ma'am, Kalpana ma'am, and Deepa ma'am. Your expertise and insights have enlightened us all and left a lasting impact. You have been the driving force behind the success of this webinar. Last but not the least, I would like to extend a special word of thanks to each of you who joined us today from different corners of the world. Your presence and active participation have truly made a difference, and we hope this webinar has been both informative and inspiring for you. As we conclude this webinar, let us carry forward the knowledge and insights gained here today into our respective institutions. Together, we can create positive change and foster a brighter future. Remember, tomorrow we have another exciting webinar lined up where we will explore the second part of the first domain, that is pedagogy under SQAAF. Thank you.
Dipanshu, have you reminded them about the feedback form? You can
Yes,
post it
yes.
again.
Feedback, okay, ma'am. Feedback form is also posted at your comment section. It has been pinned up. Please fill it.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Namaskar.
Dipanshu is going to mark the number of feedback forms coming in
Yes, ma'am.
in his anecdotal record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
God
Dipanshu.
bless.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Rita ma'am, for the amazing session.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Namaskar.